I was 33 years old the first time I saw my own face. Not a reflection in a pond, not a smudge of myself in a dark window at night. My own face, clear as day, looking back at me from a mirror in a gas station bathroom outside of Lancaster County. And I want to tell you, I did not recognize the woman staring back at me. I stood there so long that another woman knocked on the door to ask if I was all right. I wasn't all right. I was 33 years old, and I was meeting myself for the very first time. Before I tell you what happened in that bathroom, and before I tell you what I saw in my own eyes that day, I want to ask you for something. If you are watching this, wherever you are in the world, I want you to type it in the comments below. Tell me the name of your town, your city, your country. I have never in my life imagined that my story would travel further than the county line, and now I am told it goes out to people sitting in living rooms and kitchens all over the earth. I would like to know where you are sitting right now, as you listen to an old woman tell you about the day she finally saw her own face. And while you are down there in the comments, if this story is worth your time, I would be so grateful if you would press that little button to subscribe, and the one to like the video too. It costs you nothing, and it means the world to an old woman who spent most of her life being told that no one was supposed to be looking at her at all. Now let me start from the beginning, because you cannot understand what a mirror meant to me unless you understand what it meant to grow up in a world where mirrors, for the most part, did not exist. I was born on a farm in a valley where the fog sat low in the mornings and lifted by the time the roosters had finished their complaining. There were no mirrors in our house. Not one, not anywhere, except for a small shaving mirror my father kept in a drawer. No bigger than the palm of my hand, and even that was used quickly and put away, like it was something a little bit shameful. My mother did not know what her own face looked like past the age of maybe 20. Not really. She knew the shape of her hands, the calluses on her palms, the ache in her lower back by the end of a long day of canning. But her face, the actual lines and colors and shape of it, that was mostly a mystery to her. Same as it was to me. Same as it was to every girl I grew up with. You have to understand, in the community I was raised in, mirrors were seen as an invitation to vanity. And vanity was one of the great sins, right up there with pride. Pride was the sin that got Satan thrown out of heaven, or so I was taught from the time I could understand words. Pride made a person look inward at themselves instead of outward at God and their neighbor. And what was a mirror, really, except a tool built for exactly that purpose? A tool to look at yourself, to admire yourself, to fuss over yourself. So we did not have them. We did not need them, we were told. A woman did not need to see her own face to know if her prayer covering was on straight. She could feel it with her hands. She could ask her sister, or her mother, or her daughter. Appearance was something checked by touch and by the eyes of others, never by your own reflection. I did not think this was strange growing up. A child does not question the water she swims in. I thought every household in the world was like ours. I thought every little girl braided her sister's hair by feel, standing behind her, fingers moving through hair they had memorized rather than seen. I thought every woman dressed herself each morning without ever once checking how she looked, because how she looked was not the point. The point was whether she was dressed modestly, whether her dress was clean, whether her cap covered her hair the way it was supposed to. Those were things you could know without ever looking at yourself. My mother used to say that the Lord did not give us eyes in the back of our heads for a reason, and she did not mean it as a joke. Not really. She meant that we were built by God to look outward, at our work, at our families, at our fields and our chores and the people around us who needed us, not inward, and certainly not at a piece of glass with silver backing that showed us nothing but our own vanity staring back. I remember believing this with my whole heart. I remember feeling almost sorry for the English people, the outside people, when I would catch a glimpse of them in town, checking themselves in a shop window, patting their hair, adjusting their collar. It looked to me like a kind of sickness, this constant looking at yourself. I thought, these poor people, they cannot go 5 minutes without checking if they are still there. I grew up the third of 8 children, on a farm that had been in my father's family for 4 generations. We rose before the sun most days. There was milking to do, and eggs to gather, and bread to bake, and gardens to tend, and always, always laundry. Because when you have 8 children and 2 parents and hired hands during the harvest, there is always, always laundry. My hands were rough by the time I was 10 years old. My mother's hands were rougher still, and her mother's hands, when she was still alive, were the roughest of all. Like tree bark, like the leather of an old harness. We wore that roughness the way other families might wear jewelry. It was proof that we worked. And work was close to godliness in our world, maybe closer than anything else. I want you to picture the dresses we wore. Solid colors, no patterns, no prints. Made by our mothers, and later by ourselves. Cut from the same handful of patterns that had been passed down for generations. We did not choose our dresses the way I understand young girls choose their clothing now, standing in front of racks of clothing trying to decide what expresses who they are. Our clothing was not meant to express anything about us as individuals. It was meant to say one thing only. I belong to this people, and I have set my will aside for the sake of that belonging. That was the whole purpose. Not beauty, not uniqueness. Belonging and humility and the setting aside of the self. And the cap, the little white cap we wore over our hair, that was the same. It was not decoration. It was a covering, a symbol from the scriptures about a woman's submission and her modesty before God. We wore it from a young age, and we wore it every day for the rest of our lives, and I want to tell you, I wore that little white cap for 33 years without once seeing, truly seeing, what it looked like sitting on top of my own head. I knew what it looked like on my sisters. I knew what it looked like on my mother. I did not know what it looked like on me, not with my own 2 eyes, not for 33 years. Is that strange to you? I understand if it is. I have had a long time now, many years on the outside, to understand just how strange it sounds to people who grew up with mirrors in every room. Mirrors in their pockets even, in those little phones everyone carries now. But I want you to sit with that strangeness for just a moment, because I think there is something in it worth sitting with. What does it do to a person to grow up never truly knowing her own face? I have thought about this question more than almost any other question in my life, and I am going to spend the rest of this video trying to answer it, as honestly as I know how. There is a story my mother used to tell about a girl in her own youth. A girl named Sadie, who had gotten hold of a small mirror somehow. Maybe from a store in town, maybe traded from an English neighbor. Nobody quite remembered how. Sadie kept it hidden in the barn, tucked behind a loose board, and she would go out there in the evenings when her chores were done and look at herself by lantern light. My mother told this story the way you might tell a ghost story, in a hushed voice, and the moral was always the same. Sadie was found out eventually. Her mother found the mirror behind the board, and Sadie was made to kneel and confess before the family, and the mirror was smashed with a hammer right there in the yard, and Sadie cried for days. Not because the mirror was broken, my mother said, but because she was ashamed of what the mirror had done to her heart. She had started, my mother said, to care more about her own face than about her family, than about her work, than about God. That was what a mirror could do to a person, my mother warned us. It could steal your heart right out of your chest and leave vanity sitting in its place. I believed this story completely as a child. I did not think to ask whether it was really true, whether there had truly been a girl named Sadie, or whether the story had grown taller with each telling, the way stories do in families, the way a fish grows bigger every time the fisherman tells about the one that got away. I simply absorbed the lesson the way I absorbed everything else in those years, without question. The way you absorb the color of the sky or the taste of well water. Mirrors were dangerous. Mirrors made you vain. Vanity separated you from God and from your people. This was as certain to me as the fact that the sun rose in the east. And yet, I want to be honest with you, because that is the whole point of me sitting here telling you this story so many years later. There were moments, quiet moments, when I was young, when I wondered. I would catch my reflection in the dark glass of a window at night, faint and wavering, more shadow than face, and I would study it for just a second before looking away, feeling guilty, feeling like I had done something almost like Sadie had done. I would see myself in the metal of a spoon, distorted and strange, my nose too big, my eyes too small. And I would wonder, just for a flicker of a moment, is that really what I look like? And then I would set the spoon down and go on with my chores, because wondering about such things was not something a good girl did, not out loud, not even really in the privacy of her own mind if she could help it. The nearest thing we had to a true reflection of ourselves was each other. My sisters were my mirror. When my sister Katie would look at me and say, "Your covering is crooked. Fix it," that was how I knew. When my mother would look me over before church on a Sunday morning and nod, or frown and tug at my collar, that was how I knew whether I looked the way I was supposed to look. My sense of my own appearance was built entirely secondhand, through the eyes and the words of the people around me. I did not own my own image. My family owned it in a way, or at least they were the custodians of it, the ones who got to decide and describe what I looked like, because I myself was not permitted the tools to check. I think now, looking back with all these years of distance, that this was one of the deepest ways our community shaped us, without our even realizing we were being shaped. It was not only that we could not look at our own faces. It was that we learned from the earliest age not to think of our faces, our bodies, our appearance, as belonging to us at all. They belonged to the community. They belonged to God, in the sense that everything belonged to God. But more immediately, more practically, they belonged to the collective eye of the people around us, who would tell us if something was wrong, who would correct us, who held the authority over how we were seen, because we were never given the authority to see ourselves. I want to be fair here, because there is more than one way to tell this story, and I do not want to tell it only in shadows. There was something in that life too, something I have missed at times in all the years since I left, and it would not be honest of me to leave it out. When you are not looking at yourself, when you are not spending your mental energy wondering if your hair looks right, or if you have gained weight, or if the wrinkles around your eyes are getting worse, you have all of that energy left over for other things. For your work, for your family, for your prayers, for your neighbor's need. I did not grow up anxious about my looks in the way I would later learn so many women in the outside world are anxious about their looks, because I simply never learned to think about my looks at all. In some strange way, not having a mirror protected me from a particular kind of suffering, even while it created a different kind of suffering that I would not understand until much, much later. But do not mistake what I am saying. I am not here to tell you that a life without mirrors is a better life, some pure and simple existence free of vanity's sting. That is too easy an answer, and it is not the true one. What I am telling you is that it is a different life, a life built on a different foundation, and that foundation has its own gifts and its own costs. And I paid the cost of mine for 33 years before I understood what it had taken from me. When I turned 16, my life changed the way it changed for every young person in our community. This was the season we called Rumspringa, though I know that word has become something of a joke in the outside world. Something people picture as wild parties and fast cars and a taste of every worldly pleasure before a young person decides whether to be baptized into the church. I want to tell you, at least for me, and for most of the young people I knew, it was nothing so dramatic as that. It was simply a loosening of the rules, a little room to breathe, a chance to attend the youth singings on Sunday evenings, to be courted, to maybe ride in a car with an English friend once or twice, to try on, just a little, what the wider world might feel like, before choosing, with open eyes, to stay. And I did choose to stay. I want you to understand that, because it matters for what comes later. I was not a rebellious girl. I did not chafe against the rules the way some of my cousins did. I loved my family. I loved the rhythm of the seasons, the smell of bread rising in the kitchen, the sound of hymns sung slow and deep in a room full of people who had known me my whole life. When I was 17, I was baptized into the church, kneeling in a room full of my community, promising before God and before all of them that I would live the rest of my life according to the Ordnung, the unwritten rules that governed everything from how we dressed to how fast we could drive a buggy to whether or not we could own a mirror. I meant every word of that promise. I want you to know that. Whatever came later, whatever changed in me over the years that followed, I was not a young woman making a promise she did not believe. I believed it with my whole heart. I believed that this life, this plain and simple and mirror-less life, was the life God wanted for me, and I was, for many years, at peace with that belief. I was courted by a young man named Amish when I was 19. He drove a horse and buggy up to my parents' farm on Sunday evenings, and we would sit on the porch or take long, slow rides down the country roads, talking about nothing much at all. The weather, the crops, his brothers, my sisters. He was a quiet man, gentle with the horses, gentle with his words, and I fell in love with him the way you fall in love with someone you have known your whole life. Slowly, without a single dramatic moment, more like a field ripening than like a lightning strike. We were married when I was 20, in a wedding that lasted the better part of a day, with more food than I had ever seen in one place, and singing, and the whole community gathered to bless our union. I did not see myself on my wedding day. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because I think it is one of the strangest facts of my whole life, stranger to me now than it was then. My wedding dress was blue, a color chosen not for fashion, but simply because it was practical. A dress I could wear again after the wedding for church and for other occasions. My mother and my sisters dressed me that morning, fussing over the fit, tugging the fabric here and there, and I stood there and let them, and not once did I see what I looked like. I do not know to this day what I looked like on my wedding day. I have no photograph, because we did not take photographs either. Another form of vanity, another form of graven image that our faith forbade. I have only the memory of how it felt. The weight of the fabric, the tightness of my new cap pinned carefully in place, and the look on Amos's face when he saw me, which I suppose was the only mirror I really had that day, his eyes, and what I could read in them. I have thought about this so many times since. A woman spends her whole life being told what she looks like through the eyes of others, and on the one day when she might most want to see herself, the day she is meant to feel most beautiful, she is denied even that. I did not resent it at the time. I want to be honest about that too. I felt no lack, no sense of missing out, because I did not know what I was missing. You cannot miss what you have never had, but I think, now, of the young bride I was, standing in that farmhouse in her blue dress, never once catching her own reflection, and I feel something for her. Not exactly sadness. Something quieter than sadness. A kind of tenderness for a girl who did not know what she did not know. Amos and I settled onto a small piece of land not far from my parents' farm, land his father had helped us purchase, as was the custom. We began our life together the way every young couple in our community began theirs, with hard work and long days, and the slow building of a household from almost nothing. I learned to run a home the way my mother had run hers. I learned his habits, the way he liked his coffee, the way he hummed under his breath while he worked in the barn, the particular silence that meant he was troubled about something and needed time before he was ready to talk about it. We built a marriage the old way, through years of small accumulated knowings, rather than through the kind of talking and analyzing I understand is common in the outside world now. Within 2 years, I was carrying our first child. I remember that time as one of the happiest of my life, and I do not say that lightly, not after everything that came after. There was a particular kind of joy in that farmhouse kitchen, in the anticipation, in the small clothes I was sewing, in the way my body was changing, in ways I could feel but, again, could never quite see. I felt my belly grow round under my hands. I never once looked at it in a mirror. I knew I was changing only through touch, through the way my dresses fit differently, through what Amos told me, through what my mother and sisters observed and commented on when they visited. My own body, in the most literal sense, was something I inhabited without ever fully seeing. We had 5 children over the years, Amos and I. 2 sons and 3 daughters. I will not use their names here, because even now, even after everything, I want to protect their privacy, and the privacy of the community they still belong to. I raised those children the same way I had been raised. No mirrors in the house, plain dress, hard work from the youngest age they could manage a task, prayer at every meal and at the beginning and end of every day. I taught my daughters to braid hair by feel, the same way my sister had taught me, standing behind them, my fingers moving through hair I knew better than I knew my own face. I taught them to sew, to can vegetables, to bake bread that would rise just right in a wood-fired oven, to be modest and humble and hard-working, because that was what a good life required, or so I believed with everything in me. I want to tell you about the texture of those years, because I think it is important, before I tell you how they ended, for you to understand what I was leaving when I left. It was not a life of misery. I need you to understand that clearly, because I know there are stories out there, stories about the Amish, that make it sound like every person who leaves is escaping some terrible darkness, some abuse, some cruelty. That was not my story, not entirely. There was cruelty in my community, yes, there is cruelty in every community of human beings, and I will tell you about some of it before this video is through. But there was also real love, real joy, real beauty in the rhythm of a life lived close to the land, close to family, close to a faith that, whatever its flaws, gave shape and meaning to every single day. I remember mornings in autumn when the whole family would go out to help with the harvest. My children running between the rows with their cousins. My husband's laugh carrying across the field. The smell of wood smoke and drying leaves. I remember quilting frolics with the women of my community. A dozen of us gathered around a quilt frame, needles moving in rhythm, gossip and laughter, and the comfortable silence of women who had known each other their whole lives, who did not need to fill every quiet moment with talk. I remember the hymns we sang in church, slow and deep, the kind of singing that seems to come up from the ground itself rather than from any individual throat. A whole room of voices moving as one. There was a wholeness to that life, a sense of belonging to something bigger than myself, that I have never fully found again in all the years since, not in the same way. But there were cracks. There were always cracks, even in those good years. Small ones that I mostly managed to ignore, the way you ignore a hairline crack in a foundation until the day it finally splits wide open. The first crack, if I am honest, came when my second daughter was born with a weakness in her hip, a condition that in the outside world would have been caught and treated easily. But in our community, where medical care was often delayed, where we relied on home remedies and only sought a doctor as a last resort, went unaddressed for the better part of a year. By the time we finally took her to an English doctor, against the quiet disapproval of some in our community who felt we should have trusted more in prayer and less in worldly medicine, the damage had set in a way that would leave her with a limp for the rest of her life. I remember sitting in that doctor's waiting room, a room with mirrors on the walls. Actual mirrors, meant, I suppose, to make the small space feel bigger, and catching sight of myself for just a flicker of a second, and feeling something strange and unfamiliar rise up in my chest. Something that felt almost like anger, though I did not have a name for it then. The second crack came slower, over years, and it had to do with my husband Amish. He was a good man, I want to say that clearly, a good father, a hard worker, faithful to his church and to our marriage in every way that mattered on the surface. But he had a temper that grew worse as the years went on. A temper he mostly kept in check, but that would flare occasionally, in ways that frightened me and frightened our children. I do not want to say too much about this, because it is not the center of my story, but I want to be honest that our marriage was not the simple storybook thing I described a few minutes ago. It had real difficulty in it, real pain. The kind of pain that a woman in my position in my community had almost no way to name or address, because divorce was not something that was done. And complaining about your husband, even to your own mother, was seen as a kind of disloyalty, a failure of submission, a sin in its own right. The third crack, and I think this might be the deepest one, the one that eventually split everything open, came from something much quieter than either of those first two things. It came from a growing, persistent, almost unbearable sense that I did not know who I was. This is a strange thing to say, I know, especially coming from a woman who had spent her whole life surrounded by family, by community, by a faith that told her exactly who she was supposed to be at every moment of every day. But that, I came to understand slowly, over years, was exactly the problem. I knew who I was supposed to be. I did not know who I actually was, underneath all of that supposed to be, and I had no way of finding out. Because every tool a person might normally use to discover herself, solitude, self-reflection, even literal reflection in a mirror, was discouraged or forbidden outright. I began to have thoughts in those years that frightened me. Thoughts I did not share with anyone, not even Amos, not even my own mother. I would lie awake at night after everyone else was asleep and wonder, who am I when no one is watching me? What do I actually believe underneath the beliefs I was given? If I could see my own face, really see it, what would it tell me about the life I had lived? These were not thoughts that had any place in the world I had grown up in, and having them at all felt to me like a betrayal, like I was becoming the very thing I had been warned against my whole life. Vain, prideful too, concerned with the self. The thing that finally broke everything open happened when I was 32 years old, 1 year before I left. Amos died. He was working in the barn on a cold February morning, repairing some machinery, and there was an accident. The kind of accident that happens on farms more often than anyone likes to admit, and by the time I found him, it was already too late. I will not describe the details of that morning. Some things belong only to me, even now, even in a video where I have decided to share so much. I will only tell you that I became a widow at 32, with 5 children, the youngest not yet 4 years old, and that the grief of that year is not something I can fully put into words, not even after all this time. In our community, a widow was cared for, in a fashion. There were rules for this too, unwritten but well understood. My community brought food. They helped with the farm work. My brothers-in-law took over the heaviest labor, the plowing, the harvesting, the things I could not manage alone with young children underfoot. There was real kindness in this, real generosity, and I do not want to diminish it. But there was also an expectation, quiet but unmistakable, that I would soon remarry, that a widow with 5 children and a farm needed a husband, needed to be folded back into the structure of a household headed by a man, sooner rather than later. Within 6 months of Amos's death, there were already men, older widowers mostly, or younger men whose first marriages had not worked out, coming around the way Amos once had, sitting on my porch, offering to help with this or that, in a manner that I understood, without anyone needing to say it out loud, was a kind of courtship. I want to tell you something that I have never fully said out loud before, not even to my own children, not until I sat down to make this video. When I looked at those men, when I imagined marrying again, settling back into the life I had known, I felt something inside myself that I can only describe as a door slamming shut. Not fear of the men themselves. Most of them were decent enough, in their own way. It was something else. It was the recognition that if I remarried within my community, I would spend the rest of my life exactly the way I had spent the first 32 years of it, never knowing who I actually was underneath the roles I had been given. Wife, mother, church member, submissive helpmate. I would die, someday an old woman, having never once truly looked myself in the eye. That thought terrified me more than grief had, more than loneliness, more than the prospect of raising 5 children alone, with no husband, no farm income of my own, no education beyond an 8th grade schooling, and almost no experience navigating the world outside the only community I had ever known. I want you to understand how frightening that thought was, because I think it helps explain what I did next, which to some people, even now, seems like madness, seems like abandonment, seems like a selfish and terrible choice. I began, quietly over the months that followed, to plan my leaving. I did not do this all at once. I want to be clear about that, because I think there is a mistaken idea out there in the wider world that people who leave the Amish simply wake up one day and walk out the door. It does not happen that way. Not for most of us. And it certainly did not happen that way for me. It took the better part of a year. I had to figure out, in secret, how a woman like me might survive outside the only world she had ever known. I had almost no money of my own. I had 5 children who had never attended anything but a one-room Amish schoolhouse. I had no driver's license, no social security card that I knew the location of, no understanding of things that outside people take entirely for granted, how to use a bank, how to rent an apartment, how the school system worked, how to buy groceries in a store that did not know me and did not extend credit the way our local shopkeepers had. I found help, eventually, through a woman I had met at the doctor's office all those years earlier, during my daughter's hip treatment, a kind English nurse who had given me her telephone number back then, almost as an afterthought, telling me if I ever needed anything to call. I had kept that scrap of paper for years, tucked into the lining of a sewing box, not entirely sure why I was keeping it, except that some part of me, even then, must have known that someday I might need it. I called her from a payphone outside the feed store one afternoon, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the receiver, and I told her, in a voice I barely recognized as my own, that I thought I needed to leave, and that I did not know how. That woman, whose name was Ruth, and who I will be forever grateful to for the rest of my life, helped me the way you would help a person walking blind through unfamiliar territory. She helped me get copies of documents I needed. She helped me find out about programs, organizations that exist specifically to help people leaving closed religious communities. Organizations I had never known existed, because of course I had never known. Because the whole point of the world I came from was to keep such knowledge out of reach. She helped me find a small apartment in a town about 40 miles from where I had grown up, far enough that I would not run into my community every time I went to the store, close enough that my children, if they chose, someday, could still visit the family they were leaving behind. I left on a Tuesday morning in March, 1 year and 1 month after Amos had died. I chose a Tuesday because it was not a church Sunday, and because my oldest son, who was 12 at the time and had begun, quietly, to side with the relatives who felt I should remarry rather than run, was going to be away that day, helping an uncle with some work, and I did not think I had the strength to leave if I had to look him in the eye while doing it. I packed what I could into 2 suitcases and several cardboard boxes, mostly clothes and a few precious things, my mother's Bible, some photographs of Amos that a sympathetic English neighbor had taken over the years, against the rules, and kept safe for me. I took my 4 younger children. My oldest son stayed behind, with his uncle's family, and it would be almost 6 years before he spoke to me again. I want to tell you that wound has never fully healed, and I do not expect it ever will. Not completely. There is a grief particular to a mother whose child chooses, even for reasons she understands, to walk away from her. Ruth picked us up in her car at the end of our lane before dawn, and I remember looking back at the farmhouse as we drove away, the house where I had raised my children, where Amos and I had built our whole life together, growing smaller and smaller in the side mirror of that car. Which I remember thinking, even in the middle of all that grief and fear, was itself a strange kind of mirror, a mirror that showed you not your own face, but the life you were leaving behind, getting smaller and smaller with every passing second. If you are still with me, I want to pause here and ask you again, please, if you have not already, to leave a comment telling me where in the world you are watching this from. I have read every single comment on every video I have made so far, and I want you to know that hearing from people in places I will likely never visit, cities I could not have found on a map, when I was your age. It does something for me that I find hard to put into words. It makes the world feel large and connected in a way that the world I grew up in never allowed me to imagine. And if this story is moving you the way I hope it is, please take just a moment to like this video and subscribe to this channel so that more of my story and the stories of others like me can reach the people who need to hear them. The first few months on the outside were, I will be honest with you, some of the hardest months of my entire life. Harder, in some ways, than losing Amish, because grief, at least, was a feeling I understood, a feeling my whole community had taught me how to carry. This was different. This was disorientation so complete that I sometimes felt as though I had been born again into a body I did not know how to operate, in a world whose rules I did not understand. Everything was different. The way people talked to each other, quickly, casually, without the careful formality I had grown up with. The way stores were laid out, aisles and aisles of choices where I had grown up with a single general store that carried exactly what a person needed and nothing more. The sound of the world itself was different. Cars and televisions and telephones ringing and machines humming in ways I had spent my whole life without. My children struggled too, of course, adjusting to schools where the other children had never seen anyone dressed the way we still dressed in those first weeks, before Ruth helped me find some modest, plain, but modern clothing for them, adjusting to a curriculum far beyond anything an Amish schoolhouse had prepared them for. And through all of that disorientation, I still had not seen my own face. Weeks went by. I avoided the small mirror in the apartment's tiny bathroom the way you avoid a hole in the ice you know is dangerous. I would wash my face with my eyes half closed, or looking down at the sink, some old habit of avoidance so deep in me that I did not even fully register I was doing it until Ruth pointed it out to me one afternoon. Gently, the way you point out something to a person you have grown fond of and worried about. She asked me, "Have you looked at yourself yet?" And I remember the question landing in my chest like a stone dropped into still water, ripples spreading out in every direction. I had to admit that I had not. 6 weeks outside my community, and I had not once looked at my own face. The day it finally happened was not a planned day. I want to tell you that, because I think if I had planned it, if I had built it up in my mind as some grand event, I might never have gone through with it at all. It happened almost by accident, the way the truest moments of our lives so often do. I was driving, or rather, Ruth was driving me, because I did not yet have my license, to a government office 2 towns over to sort out some paperwork for my children's school enrollment. We stopped along the way at a gas station so Ruth could fill the tank and I could use the restroom, and I walked into that little bathroom. The kind you find at any gas station in this country. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of hand soap and disinfectant, and there, above the sink, was a mirror, an ordinary mirror, nothing special about it at all. Streaked a little at the edges from countless hands, bolted to the wall, the kind of mirror that a person in the outside world probably walks past 100 times a day without a single thought. I finished what I had gone in there to do, and I walked to the sink to wash my hands. And I do not know exactly what made that particular moment different from all the moments before it, all the sinks I had washed my hands at over the previous 6 weeks, with my eyes carefully lowered. Maybe I was tired. Maybe some part of me had simply run out of the will it took to keep avoiding myself. But I looked up, and there I was. I want to try to describe to you what that moment felt like, though I have tried many times over the years, in conversations with my children, with Ruth, with the therapist I began seeing not long after, and I have never quite managed to capture it fully in words. The first thing I felt was a kind of shock, a physical jolt, as though I had touched something I expected to be cool and found it burning hot instead. I did not, in that first half second, fully register that the woman in the mirror was me. I looked behind myself, foolishly, as if there might be another woman standing there whose reflection I was somehow seeing instead of my own. But there was no one else there. It was me. 33 years old. My hair, which I had always imagined, based on nothing but touch and the vague comments of family members over the years, as a plain, mousy brown, was actually a deep chestnut color, with threads of gray already beginning to show at the temples. More gray than I expected for a woman my age. Gray I understood in that instant to be the visible mark of everything I had carried. Amos's death. 5 children. A lifetime of hard labor and harder choices. My face was more lined than I had imagined, lines fanning out from the corners of my eyes, a deep crease between my eyebrows that I recognized, with a strange jolt, as the exact expression of worry I remembered on my own mother's face, an expression I had apparently inherited or absorbed so completely that I now wore it myself, without ever having known. My eyes. I want to tell you about my eyes, because this is the part that undid me completely. They were blue. A blue I had genuinely never known, because no one in 33 years had ever specifically described the color of my own eyes to me in a way that had truly registered. I had heard vaguely over the years comments, "Oh, you have your father's eyes," or "Your eyes are so blue." But hearing a description and seeing a color are 2 entirely different experiences, and I stood there in that gas station bathroom, looking into eyes that were, unmistakably, undeniably, beautiful. A deep, clear blue like the sky in October, and I began to cry, right there at the sink, in a way I had not cried since the morning I found Amos in the barn. I could not stop looking at myself. I know that sounds like exactly the vanity I had been warned against my entire life, and in the days that followed, some small, deeply ingrained part of me did feel a flicker of that old shame, the reflex of a lifetime telling me that this fascination with my own face was sinful, was wrong, was the exact thing that had gotten poor imaginary Sadie's mirror smashed with a hammer in the story my mother used to tell. But underneath that flicker of old shame, there was something else, something larger and more powerful, a feeling I can only describe as recognition. I was meeting myself. After 33 years of living inside this body, moving it through the world, feeding it, clothing it, growing 5 children inside it, working it to exhaustion in fields and kitchens and barns, I was, for the first time, actually seeing the vessel that had carried me through, every single day of my life. I noticed things I had genuinely never known. A small scar above my left eyebrow, from a childhood fall off a hay wagon that I remembered clearly, but had never connected to any visible mark, because I had never had the means to look and see whether it had left one. The particular shape of my own smile, lopsided, higher on the left side than the right, a detail so small and so entirely mine that seeing it felt like being introduced to a stranger who was impossibly also myself. I noticed the way worry sat in my face even when I was not actively worrying, a permanent residue of decades of quiet anxiety I had never fully allowed myself to name. I noticed that I looked older than 33, and also somehow, in a way I cannot fully explain, younger. Because there was something in my own eyes, once I finally saw them, that still looked like the girl who used to catch faint reflections in dark windows and quickly look away. Ruth found me there, eventually when I did not come back out to the car, and she did not rush me. She stood in the doorway of that little bathroom and let me look and cry and look some more for as long as I needed, and I remember her saying, very softly, "There you are. Not there's your reflection. Not that's what you look like. Just there you are," as though I had been missing. As though some part of me had genuinely been lost for 33 years and had just, in that fluorescent lit gas station bathroom, finally been found. I want to tell you what changed after that day, because the mirror itself was not really the point. The mirror was only a doorway. What mattered was everything that walked through it afterward. In the weeks and months that followed, I began for the first time in my life to actually look at myself regularly. Not obsessively. Not in the way I once feared mirrors might make a person behave. Checking constantly, fussing endlessly. Though I understand now, having lived in the outside world for many years, that this obsessive relationship with appearance is a real danger too. One I have watched some of my own daughters and granddaughters wrestle with. Growing up in a culture that in some ways looks at faces and bodies far too much. The opposite extreme from the world I came from, and no healthier for it, I think, in its own way. But for me in those early months, looking at myself became a kind of quiet, necessary practice, almost like a new form of prayer. I would look at myself in the morning and think, "This is the face that raised 5 children." I would look at the lines around my eyes and think, "This is the face that has laughed, and this is the face that has grieved, and both of those things left their marks, and both of those marks are mine to keep." I began to understand something that I do not think I could have understood any other way, which is that a face is not simply a surface. A face is a record. It is the physical history of everything a person has lived through, written slowly, line by line, year by year, onto the only canvas any of us are given. I had lived 33 years without ever once being allowed to read that record, and now, finally, I could. This changed how I thought about myself in ways that went far beyond the physical. I began, for the first time, to ask myself questions I had never had the tools or the permission to ask before. Not just what do I look like, but who am I, actually, underneath all the roles I had been given? What do I believe? When I strip away everything I was told to believe, what do I want? Not for my children, not for my community, not for God as others had defined God to me, but for myself as an individual person with her own single, unrepeatable life to live. These are ordinary questions, I understand, for most people raised in the outside world. Children here are taught, almost from birth, to think of themselves as individuals with their own preferences, their own personalities, their own paths to discover and choose. I had none of that scaffolding. I had to build it from nothing, at 33 years old, with 5 children depending on me. In a world whose most basic assumptions were foreign to everything I had been raised to believe. It was some of the hardest work I have ever done, harder in its own way than any physical labor on that farm had ever been, because at least physical labor has a clear beginning and a clear end. This work, the work of discovering who I actually was, had no end that I could see. And in some ways I am still doing it now. All these years later, an old woman still learning new things about her own face and her own heart with each passing year. I want to tell you about my children, briefly, because I think you deserve to know how the story continued past that gas station bathroom. My 4 younger children adjusted, over time, the way children often do, with more flexibility and resilience than I ever managed to muster for myself. They finished school. They built lives in the outside world, careers, marriages, homes of their own. filled with mirrors and photographs and all the ordinary trappings of modern life that once would have seemed sinful to the people who raised me. My oldest son, the one who stayed behind, did eventually reach out to me. When he was 19, a young man himself by then, and though our relationship has never been what it might have been if I had never left, we have found, over the years, a kind of peace with each other. An understanding that does not require either of us to fully agree with the other's choices. I remarried, eventually, some years later, to a kind man named Walter, who I met through a support group for people who had left closed religious communities. A man who understood, without needing lengthy explanations, what it meant to build an identity from scratch in the middle of your own life. Walter has been gone now for almost 6 years himself, taken by a cancer that moved faster than any of us expected, and I find myself, in my old age, a widow once again. Though this time I face it as a woman who knows her own face, her own heart, her own mind, in a way that the young widow of 32, sitting on her porch all those years ago, could never have imagined possible. There were other firsts in those early months that I have not yet told you about, and I think they matter too, because the mirror was only the beginning of a much longer process of learning to see myself in every sense of that word. Not long after the gas station, Ruth took a photograph of me on her telephone. A simple little snapshot, nothing special, taken in her kitchen while I was helping her prepare supper. I did not know, in that moment, what she had done, because the sound those telephones make is so quiet, so unlike the flash and click of the old cameras I had heard about but never actually witnessed growing up. She showed it to me afterward, turning the small glowing screen toward me, and I remember staring at it in a kind of stunned silence. Because it was one thing to see myself in a mirror, moving, blinking, alive in real time, and it was an entirely different thing to see myself held perfectly still, frozen in a single moment, the way I had looked at exactly one specific second of my own life. An image that would now exist forever, long after that particular moment had passed and been forgotten by everyone who lived through it. I had been taught my whole life that photographs were a kind of graven image, forbidden by scripture, a way of trying to hold on to something that belonged only to a fleeting moment in time and to God. Seeing my own photographed face for the first time, I understood, in a new way, why my community had feared such things. Because there was something almost unbearably powerful in it. A permanence I was not at all prepared for. I asked Ruth to send that photograph to my telephone, once I finally had one of my own. A plain little device that took me months to learn to use with any confidence. My fingers, so used to the feel of fabric and dough and harnessed leather, clumsy and uncertain against the smooth glass screen. I kept that first photograph of myself for years afterward, and I still have it, printed now on paper, tucked into a small frame on my dresser. A woman of 33 with tired eyes and flour on her hands, looking directly into a camera for the first time in her life, caught somewhere between fear and wonder. I look at that photograph now, decades later, and I feel such tenderness for her, that woman in the kitchen, still trembling from everything that had just been asked of her, still uncertain whether she had made a terrible mistake or the only choice that could have saved her. Learning to drive was its own kind of mirror, in an unexpected way. My instructor, a patient older man named Frank who specialized, it turned out, in teaching people exactly like me. People who had left plain communities and never sat behind a wheel in their lives, made me adjust the rearview mirror on my very first lesson. And I remember my hands shaking as I reached up to angle that small rectangle of glass understanding, with a jolt, that this was a tool built entirely around the idea of looking, of checking, of seeing what was behind you so that you could move forward safely. I thought in that moment about how strange it was that the outside world had built an entire object, required by law in every vehicle, whose sole purpose was reflection, was self-awareness in the most literal sense, watching what was behind you even as you moved ahead. It seemed to me like such an obvious metaphor for what I was doing with my whole life in those years that I nearly laughed out loud in the middle of that lesson, and Frank, bless him, had no idea why. I began seeing a counselor around that same time, a gentle woman named Dr. Patterson, who specialized in helping people who had left high-control religious groups, and I want to tell you, those sessions did more to help me understand myself than almost anything else in those early years. She was the first person who ever asked me, directly and patiently, what do you actually think? Not what were you taught to think, but what do you, yourself, sitting here in this room, actually believe about God, about your own worth, about what you want the rest of your life to look like? I did not have answers for her. Not at first. I remember sitting in her office in near total silence for the better part of my first several appointments, because no one had ever asked me that question before. Not once. Not in 33 years. And I genuinely did not know how to begin answering it. She was patient with my silence. She told me once that learning to know your own mind after a lifetime of being told what to think is a little like learning to walk again after a long illness. The muscles are there, but they have gone unused for so long that they have to be woken up slowly, gently, one small movement at a time. I have carried that image with me ever since. I have had many years now to think about what that gas station mirror actually taught me, beyond the simple fact of what my own face looked like. And I want to share some of those thoughts with you now, because I think they matter to more people than just those of us who grew up without mirrors. The first thing I learned is that you cannot fully know yourself through the eyes of others alone. I spent 33 years being told who I was, what I looked like, what I believed, what I was permitted to want, entirely through the mediation of my family, my church, my community. And I want to be fair. There is real wisdom in a community that helps shape a person, that offers guardrails, that connects an individual to something larger than her own passing whims and moods. I do not believe, even now, in a philosophy that says every person should be left entirely alone to construct herself with no outside guidance at all. That is its own kind of danger. I think its own kind of poverty. But there has to be a balance. A person also needs the chance, at some point in her life, to look directly at herself, without an intermediary, without someone else's voice standing between her and her own reflection, and decide with her own eyes who she actually is. I was denied that chance for 33 years, and I do not think any person, in any culture, in any faith, should be denied it for a single day longer than necessary. The second thing I learned is that the fear of vanity, the fear that drove my community to remove mirrors from our homes, was not entirely wrong, but it was aimed at the wrong target. Vanity is real. I have seen it plenty of times in the outside world. People so consumed with their own appearance that they seem to have no room left for anyone else's needs. Cultures that seem to worship the surface of a person while forgetting entirely about what lies beneath. My community was not wrong to worry about that danger. But removing the mirror does not remove the danger. It only removes the tool a person might use to actually see herself clearly, honestly, without illusion. I think, if anything, real vanity, the unhealthy kind, grows more easily in the dark, in a heart that has never had to look honestly at itself, than it does in the light of genuine self-knowledge. A woman who truly knows her own face, lines and scars and all, is less likely, I think, to be vain about it than a woman who has spent her whole life imagining, wondering, comparing herself in secret to some idealized version she has built entirely out of guesswork and the careless comments of others. The third thing I learned, and this might be the most important one, is that seeing your own face for the first time is not really about vanity at all, in either direction. It is about dignity. It is about the basic human right to know, fully and completely, the one body you have been given to walk through this world in. I do not think it is prideful for a person to know her own face. I think it is one of the most basic forms of respect a person can extend to herself. The simple willingness to look and to see, and not to look away in shame or fear. I have also come, over the years, to a more complicated understanding of my own community than I had in those first raw months after leaving. When you first leave a closed world like the one I grew up in, there is a temptation to see everything about it as darkness, and everything about the outside world as light. A simple story of escape and rescue. I told that simple story to myself for a long while, because I think I needed it, in those early years, to justify the enormous cost of what I had done. The son who would not speak to me. The mother who wept and called me lost. The whole community that treated my leaving as a kind of death, complete with its own quiet, unspoken mourning. But as the years passed, and as my own children grew into adults who could look back on their upbringing with more nuance than I was capable of in the thick of my own grief and fear, I came to see that the truth was less simple than either story. The story of pure darkness, or the story of pure light. There was real love in that community, real faith, real beauty, alongside the real harm of a system that gave a woman almost no room to know her own mind or her own face. Both of those things were true at once, and I think it took me most of my adult life to be able to hold them together without needing to choose one and discard the other. I do not regret leaving. I want to say that plainly, because I know some of you watching may wonder, after everything I have described, the beauty alongside the pain, whether some part of me wishes I had stayed. I do not wish that. But I have also stopped needing to believe that everything about the world I left behind was wrong, in order to justify the rightness, for me, of having left it. A person can leave a place, even a beloved place, not because that place is entirely bad, but because it is not the place where she, specifically, with her specific heart and her specific questions, was ever going to be able to fully become herself. I think that is closer to the truth of my story than any simpler version I might have told you in those first angry, grieving years after I drove away from that farmhouse in the dark. I think often, these days, about the granddaughters I now have, several of them, born into a world entirely different from the one I grew up in. A world of phones and screens and cameras everywhere. A world where a person can see her own face reflected back at her hundreds of times a day if she wants to, in ways I could never have imagined as a girl on that farm. And I worry for them too, in a different direction. I worry that they see their faces too much, compare themselves too constantly, measure their worth too heavily against filtered, edited versions of faces that are not even real. I think about this a great deal. The strange truth that both extremes, no mirrors at all, and mirrors absolutely everywhere, all the time, filtered and curated and endlessly scrutinized, can wound a person in their own particular way. I do not have a simple answer for how to find the right balance. I only know from my own long life That the goal is not to avoid your own reflection, and it is not to be obsessed with it either. The goal, I think, is simply to know your own face honestly, the way you might come to know an old friend, with all her flaws and all her beauty held together, without shame in either direction. If you have made it this far in my story, I want to thank you, sincerely, from the bottom of an old woman's heart. It is a strange thing to sit here all these years later and tell strangers all over the world a story I once thought I would carry silently to my grave. But I have come to believe that stories like mine matter, not because my particular life was so remarkable, but because the questions underneath it, who gets to decide what you look like, who gets to decide who you are questions that touch far more people than just those of us who grew up plain, without a single mirror in the house. I want to leave you with one more small memory before I close this video, because I think it captures something I have not quite managed to say directly yet. A few years after I left, once I had settled into my new life, once I had my own small apartment with, yes, several mirrors in it by then. A mirror in the bathroom, a mirror on my bedroom dresser, even a small hand mirror I kept in my purse, which would have scandalized my mother beyond words. I drove myself, alone, for the first time, back to the town nearest to where I had grown up. I did not go to see my family that day. I was not ready for that yet. I simply parked my car outside the general store where I had shopped as a girl, and I sat there for a long while, watching Amish families come and go, women in bonnets and plain dresses, men in their broad-brimmed hats, children running barefoot the way my own children once had. And I found myself thinking, not with anger, and not with the kind of pity that looks down on people, but with a strange and complicated tenderness, of all those women walking in and out of that store. Women who had never seen their own faces. Women who were, in some sense, still waiting, the way I once waited without even knowing I was waiting, for a moment that might never come. I do not know how many of them will ever have a moment like mine. A gas station bathroom, a streaked mirror, a stranger's kind voice saying, "There you are." I hope, for those who want it, that moment comes, and I hope, for those who do not want it, for those who find real peace and real meaning in a life lived without mirrors, that their peace is honored too. Because I do not believe my path is the only right path, only that it needed to be my path, the one my own particular life required of me. I think about Sadie sometimes too, the girl from my mother's cautionary story, the one whose mirror was smashed with a hammer in the yard while her family watched. I do not know if she was a real girl or a story built to teach a lesson, but either way, I think of her often, and I hope, wherever she is, if she ever existed at all, that she eventually found her own gas station bathroom, her own streaked mirror, her own moment of finally seeing her own face. I hope she found someone to stand in the doorway for her, the way Ruth stood in the doorway for me, and say, softly, "There you are." I do not know what brought each of you here today, to a video about an old Amish woman and a gas station mirror. Maybe you are curious about a world so different from your own. Maybe some part of my story touched something in your own life. A mother you have complicated feelings about. A faith you have questioned. A version of yourself you have not yet been permitted to fully see. Whatever brought you here, I am glad, genuinely glad, that you stayed to listen all the way to the end. I have told this story now more times than I can count. To my counselor, to my children, to a small support group of other women who left similar communities later in life, and each time I tell it, I find some new small detail I had forgotten, some new piece of understanding I had not quite reached before. That, I think, is the truest sign that a story is still alive in a person, still doing its work, still worth the telling. I suspect this will not be the last time I sit in front of a camera and tell some piece of it again, in some new way, and I hope, if that day comes, some of you will still be here listening. That is my story, or at least the heart of it, the part I most wanted you to understand. 33 years without a mirror, and then a single ordinary moment in a gas station bathroom that changed absolutely everything. Not because a mirror is magic, but because seeing your own face, truly seeing it for the first time, forces you to finally ask the question underneath every other question a person can ask in this life. Who am I, really, when I stop looking at myself through everyone else's eyes? I am so grateful you spent this time with me today, listening to an old woman tell her story. If it moved you even a little, if any part of it made you think about your own face, your own reflection, your own journey toward truly knowing yourself, I would be so grateful if you would like this video and subscribe to this channel so that more stories like mine can find their way to the people who need them. And please, before you go, scroll down and leave a comment. Tell me where in the world you are watching this from. I read every single one, and I promise you, hearing from someone in a town or a country I will likely never see with my own eyes means more to this old woman than you could possibly know. Tell me too, if you are willing, whether anything in my story reminded you of a moment in your own life, a moment when you finally saw yourself clearly, in a mirror or otherwise, for the very first time. I would love to hear it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for seeing me. And I hope, with all my heart, that you take a little time today to truly see yourself too.